Jack Miller stepped off the transport ship and looked around at the alien world of Kepler 442b. With wide eyes, the purple sky stretched above him while 3 moons hung in the distance like glowing pearls. The air smelled different here, like metal and flowers mixed together. He carried only a small bag with his tools and some papers his grandfather had given him years ago. The spaceport buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy moved around him. Some looked like walking crystals that sparkled in the strange light. Others had blue skin and extra arms that moved like dancers. The sounds they made when talking hurt his ears at first, but he was getting used to it now. Lisa Chen walked up to him with a big smile on her face. She worked as a diplomat for Earth and had been his friend since they were kids back in Iowa. Her dark hair was pulled back and she wore the blue uniform that all Earth representatives had to wear. Lisa hugged him tight and said, "Welcome to the most important engineering contest in the galaxy." Jack could see worry in her eyes, even though she was trying to look happy. She knew what people were saying about humans and their simple ways of building things. The Galactic Engineering Consortium had invited every smart species to show off their best building skills. The winner would get respect for their whole planet and lots of new trade deals. Earth needed those deals badly because other worlds thought humans were not very advanced. Jack looked around at the other contestants and felt his stomach drop. The Vorthok team had brought machines that glowed with energy and made the ground shake. When they moved, the Xanthari group carried living metal that seemed to breathe and change shape on its own. Even the smallest alien teams had technology that looked like magic to him. A tall crystal being walked over to them with steps that sounded like bells ringing. This was Zarathol, one of the most famous engineers in the galaxy. Her body was made of clear purple stone that had light moving inside it, like trapped lightning. When she spoke, her voice sounded like music, but the words were not. Kindrathal looked down at Jack and made a sound that might have been laughing. She asked what primitive tools the human had brought to this serious competition. The other aliens nearby stopped what they were doing to listen, and many of them started making similar sounds. Jack opened his bag and pulled out some papers with drawings on them, along with a few simple tools that his grandfather had used to build barns back on Earth. Zarathol looked at these items like they were toys that a child might play with. She asked if humans still lived in caves and hit rocks together to make fire. More aliens gathered around them now, including Kethera, who was known for building towers that could change themselves when the weather got bad. She had blue skin and 4 arms that moved like snakes. Her eyes were completely black and seemed to look right through Jack like he was made of glass. Kethera picked up one of Jack's papers and looked at the simple drawings of beams and supports. She showed it to the other aliens, and they all made more of those laughing sounds. One of them said that human engineering was just stacking mud and hoping it would not fall down. Amy Rodriguez was there too, with her camera recording everything for the Galactic News networks. She was supposed to be neutral, but Jack could see she was embarrassed to be human right now. Her face was red, and she kept looking away when the aliens made fun of Earth building methods. The contest rules were simple, but the challenge was huge. Each team had to build something that could survive the worst weather this planet could throw at it. The storms here could melt metal, and the ground shook so hard it could break mountains. The gravity changed without warning, and plasma fell from the sky like deadly rain. Jack had studied all of this before coming here. His grandfather had taught him that every place had its own personality, and you had to learn what it wanted before you could build anything that would last. The old man had built structures that stood for over 100 years using nothing but wood and stone, and knowledge passed down through generations. Darveltara walked over to see what all the noise was about. She was the chief scientist for the whole consortium, and her word carried weight with everyone. Her skin was silver, and her head was twice as big as a human's, filled with a brain that could solve problems most species could not even understand. She looked at Jack's materials and papers with curiosity rather than mockery. Dr. Veltara asked him to explain his approach to the building challenge. Jack took a deep breath and started talking about foundation principles and load distribution and working with natural forces instead of fighting against them. The crowd of aliens listened, but Jack could tell they thought he was making things up. Zarathal said that real engineering required energy shields and molecular assemblers and force fields that could bend the laws of physics itself. She said humans were still playing with sticks and stones, while the rest of the galaxy had moved on to proper technologic era. Agreed, and added that her biomechanical systems could adapt to any environment in real time. She said her tower would literally grow new parts if it needed them, and could repair any damage. Instantly, Jack tried to explain that sometimes the simplest solutions were the strongest, but none of them wanted to hear it. Maya Johnson appeared at Jack's side like a guardian angel. She was a xenobiologist who had been studying the local ecosystem. For months her blonde hair was messy from working outside, and her clothes were covered in mud, but her eyes were bright with intelligence. Maya told the aliens that they might want to listen more carefully to what Jack was saying. She had been watching how the local creatures built their homes, and noticed that the ones who survived the longest used methods very similar to what humans had developed on Earth. The aliens dismissed Maya too, saying that copying primitive lifeforms was not real engineering. Zarathal said that advanced civilizations did not need to crawl around in the dirt, looking at how insects made their nests. They had computers that could calculate every possible stress and strain, and materials that could withstand any felt anger rising in his chest, but he remembered what his grandfather had always told him: the best response to mockery was good work done quietly. He picked up his papers and tools and walked away from the crowd toward the area where he was supposed to build his structure. Lisa followed him and asked if he was really going to go through with this contest. The odds were stacked against him, and losing badly would make things worse for Earth. In the long run, she suggested that maybe he could work with one of the alien teams instead of competing. Jack shook his head and said that his grandfather had taught him never to back down when he knew he was right. These aliens thought that more complex always meant better, but they had never lived through a tornado in Kansas, or watched a simple wooden barn stand strong while metal buildings got twisted into scrap. The construction area was huge, with marked sections for each team. Jack found his spot and was not surprised to see it was the smallest one. They had given him just enough space for a modest building, while the alien teams had areas big enough for massive towers. He knelt down and put his hands on the soil, feeling its texture and moisture. The ground here was different from Earth, but it had the same basic properties that his grandfather had taught him to recognize. He could work with this. He could make something that would last. As Jack started his preparations, the alien teams began setting up their advanced equipment. The sounds of machinery and energy systems filled the air, while lights flashed and computers hummed. The contrast between their high-tech approach and his simple tools was obvious to everyone watching. Katie Williams, the human ambassador, came by to check on him. Her face showed the strain of trying to maintain Earth's reputation while watching their representative get laughed at by the entire galaxy. She asked Jack quietly if he was sure about his methods. Jack looked up at her with dirt already under his fingernails and said that he had never been more sure of anything in his life. His grandfather had built things that lasted through world wars and natural disasters and economic collapses. The old man had known something that these advanced aliens had forgotten. The sun was setting on this strange world, painting the sky in colors that had no names. The first day of construction would begin tomorrow, and Jack had a lot of work to do. He spent the evening reviewing his plans and thinking about his grandfather, and hoping that simple human wisdom would be enough to prove that Earth belonged among the stars. The morning sun rose over the construction site, and Jack was already working. The purple light made everything look strange, but he had gotten used to it during the night. He had been up since before dawn, studying the ground and making measurements. With tools that looked ancient compared to what the aliens were using around him, the alien teams were setting up their equipment. The Vorthok had brought machines that hummed with energy and projected holographic blueprints in the air. The Zen were growing their biomechanical systems in tanks that bubbled with strange chemicals. The sounds and lights were overwhelming, but Jack kept his focus on his own small. Ariami Rodriguez was there with her camera crew, filming everything for the Galactic News Networks. She had decided to make Jack the comic relief of her story. The funny human who thought he could compete with advanced alien engineering, using nothing but mud and straw. She kept her distance, but Jack could hear her talking to her audience about primitive human methods. Jack ignored the cameras and continued his work. He had found local materials that were similar to what his grandfather had used: clay that held together well when mixed properly, and fiber from local plants that was stronger than it looked. He also discovered that the planet had a type of mineral that could help bind everything together. Maya Johnson came by early to watch him work. She was fascinated by how he tested each material before using it. Jack would take small samples and stress them in different ways. He would wet them and dry them, and heat them and cool them. Maya had never seen anyone work so carefully with such simple things. She asked Jack why he was spending so much time on basic materials, when the other teams were already building. The Vorthok Tower was growing taller by the hour, and the Zentari biostructure was beginning to take shape. Jack explained that you could not build anything good without understanding what you were building with. Dr. Valterra stopped by to observe as well. Her scientific mind was curious about human methods. Even if she did not think they would work, she watched Jack mix his clay and fiber, and asked him what calculations he was using to determine the proper ratios. Jack smiled and said that his grandfather had taught him to feel the materials rather than just measure them. The old man could tell if a mixture was right just by how it felt in his hands. Dr. Valterra looked confused and said that engineering required precise measurements, not guesswork based on feelings. Jack tried to explain that it was not guesswork but experience passed down through generations. His grandfather had learned from his grandfather who had learned from his, and so on back through hundreds of years of building things that lasted. The knowledge was in his hands and his eyes, and his understanding of how materials wanted to be behaved up. Alien teams continued to work with their advanced equipment. Zarathal was using energy fields to shape crystal formations that grew into perfect geometric patterns. Kethra was directing biomechanical systems that assembled themselves according to programs written into their genetic code. Other teams used nanoassemblers and force field generators and materials that seemed to defy physics. Meanwhile, Jack was making what looked like simple bricks. He mixed his clay and fiber and mineral binder in ratios that felt right to his experienced hands. Then he shaped them carefully and set them out to dry in the alien sun. The process was slow and looked primitive compared to the high-tech construction happening around him. Local workers came by to watch the strange human, who was working like their ancestors had worked thousands of years ago. Some of them remembered stories from their grandparents about old building methods that had been forgotten when advanced technology arrived. They seemed more interested in Jack's work than in the alien towers. One old local named Vexstar started talking to Jack in broken common language. He had worked in construction his whole life and recognized good craftsmanship when he saw it. Vexstar showed Jack some techniques that his own people had used long ago before they started buying alien technology. Jack learned that the local storms followed patterns that the native people had observed for generations. The wind always came from certain directions. At certain times the ground shook in predictable ways. During the wet season, the plasma storms had regular cycles that could be anticipated by watching the moons. This information was not in any of the official contest materials, but it was exactly what Jack needed. His grandfather had always said that you had to talk to the people who lived in a place if you wanted to understand how to build there. Local knowledge was worth more than any computer simulation. The alien teams paid no attention to the local workers. They had their own instruments and sensors and computer models that could predict everything they needed to know. They did not think that primitive local knowledge could teach them anything useful. As the day went on, Jack began laying his foundation while the alien structures grew taller and more impressive. The Vorthok Tower was already reaching toward the sky, with crystal formations that channeled and redirected energy. The Zentari biostructure was pulsing with life as it adapted and grew according to its programming. Ami Rodriguez filmed the contrast between Jack's simple work and the magnificent alien constructions. Her commentary focused on how small and primitive the human effort looked compared to the technological marvels being built around it. She interviewed several aliens who predicted that the human structure would collapse before the testing even began. Lisa Chen came by during her lunch break to check on Jack. She looked worried as she watched him carefully placing each brick by hand, while the alien machines assembled thousands of components automatically. She asked him if he was sure this was going to work. Jack looked up from his foundation and said that foundations were the most important part of any building. If you got the foundation right, everything else would follow. If you got it wrong, nothing else mattered. His grandfather had taught him that a building was only as strong as what it sat. Andiar Valtara returned with some colleagues to observe the human construction methods. They were puzzled by how much time Jack spent on seemingly simple tasks. He would adjust each brick multiple times before settling it in place, and he tested every joint with his hands before moving on. One of the alien scientists asked Jack why he did not use instruments to ensure perfect alignment. Jack explained that his hands could feel things that instruments might miss. Small variations in material density or stress patterns that could cause problems later. The aliens looked at each other like he was speaking nonsense. Maya Johnson was taking detailed notes on everything Jack did. She realized that his methods were actually very sophisticated. Even if they looked simple, each decision he made was based on deep understanding of materials and forces and environmental conditions. The aliens were using advanced technology, but Jack was using advanced knowledge. Katie Williams stopped by with other Earth representatives who had come to see how their contestant was doing. They looked nervous as they compared Jack's modest progress to the impressive alien structures rising around him. The political implications of failure were huge for Earth. Jack could feel the pressure, but he kept working steadily. His grandfather had always said that good work spoke for itself, and rushing never made anything better. The foundation had to be perfect, because everything else would depend on ATs. Evening approached. Jack had completed his foundation while some of the alien teams were already working on upper levels of their structures. The difference in speed was dramatic, but Jack was not worried. Speed was not everything in construction. He spent the evening studying the weather patterns and seismic data for the region. The testing phase would bring challenges that required more than just strong materials. Jack needed to understand how forces would move through his structure and how to guide them safely away from critical points. The alien teams worked through the night, using artificial lighting and automated systems. Their structures continued growing while Jack rested and planned the next day would bring new challenges. But Jack felt confident in his foundation. He thought about his grandfather and all the buildings the old man had created that still stood strong after decades of weather and time. Simple methods and careful work and deep understanding of natural forces. These were the tools that had served humans well for thousands of years, and Jack believed they would serve him well here too, on this alien world under strange purple skies. 3 days had passed since construction began, and the contest area looked like a showcase of galactic engineering. The Vorthok Crystal Tower stretched high into the purple sky with energy patterns flowing through its transparent walls like liquid lightning. The Xanthari biostructure pulsed with artificial life, its living metal walls breathing in rhythm with some internal heartbeat. Their alien teams had built equally impressive monuments. A team from the outer spiral had created a structure that seemed to float without any visible support, while the hegemony engineers had assembled something that looked like it belonged in a science fiction movie rather than on solid ground. In the middle of all this advanced technology sat Jack's building. It looked like something from ancient Earth history, a dome-shaped structure made of clay bricks and plant fiber with an internal framework that could barely be seen from the outside. Many spectators walked past it without stopping to look, assuming it was some kind of storage shed rather than a contest. Entry Jack was putting the finishing touches on his work, while the alien teams ran final diagnostics on their complex systems. His structure was complete, but he continued making small adjustments. checking the alignment of support beams and testing joints with his hands. The building looked simple, but every element had been carefully planned and executed. Demi Rodriguez was preparing her final report for the galactic news networks. She had spent most of her time filming the impressive alien structures and interviewing their proud creators. The human entry got only brief coverage, usually accompanied by comments about primitive construction methods and inevitable failures. She interviewed Zarathal, who stood proudly beside her crystal tower. The Vorthok engineer explained how her structure could channel and redirect any amount of energy that the planet might throw at it. The crystal matrix was designed to absorb plasma strikes and distribute the force through harmonic resonance patterns. Scathera was equally confident about her biomechanical creation. She described how the living systems could adapt to any environmental challenge in real time if the ground shook. The structure would grow stronger roots. If storms came, it would reshape itself to reduce wind resistance. The technology was beyond anything humans had ever dreamed of. Dr. Valterra walked through the contest area with a team of scientists, making final observations. Before the testing began, she stopped at each structure to review the engineering principles and theoretical frameworks involved. When she reached Jack's building, she seemed puzzled by what she was seeing. The human structure did not fit into any of the advanced engineering categories. She knew it had no energy systems or adaptive mechanisms or force field generators. Yet something about its design seemed deliberately sophisticated in ways she could not immediately understand. Maya Johnson was there taking measurements and making sketches of Jack's building. She had been documenting his entire construction process and was beginning to see patterns that the aliens had missed. Every curve and angle seemed to serve a specific purpose, related to how forces would flow through the structure. Jack explained to Maya that his grandfather had taught him to think of buildings as rivers for energy, rather than walls against it. Wind and vibration and pressure all had to go somewhere, and the trick was to guide them where you wanted them to go, instead of trying to stop them. Completely. Dr. Valterra overheard this conversation and asked Jack to elaborate on his energy flow concepts. Jack drew diagrams in the dirt, showing how his framework was designed to flex and distribute stress. His building would bend with forces rather than resist them directly, allowing it to survive impacts that might shatter more rigid structures. The alien scientist looked skeptical and pointed out that proper engineering involved precise calculations and predictable material properties. Jack agreed, but added that sometimes the most important factors could not be calculated. They had to be felt and understood through experience. Lisa Chen spent the afternoon walking around the contest area with other Earth representatives trying to maintain diplomatic relations, while privately worrying about the upcoming tests. The political pressure was enormous. Earth needed to prove that humans belonged in the galactic community. Katie Williams met with consortium officials to review the testing procedures. The challenges would begin with mild seismic activity and gradually increase to the most severe conditions the planet could produce any structure that survived. The full sequence would be considered successful. The tests were scheduled to begin at dawn the next day, giving everyone one final night to make preparations. Most of the alien teams spent the time running computer simulations and making minor adjustments to their systems. Jack spent the evening walking around his building one more time, checking everything by hand. As night fell, the 3 moons of Kepler 442b rose into the purple sky, casting strange shadows across the construction site. The alien structures glowed with internal lighting systems, while Jack's building sat quietly in the darkness, looking small and humble among the technological marvels. Jack could not sleep, so he sat outside his building thinking about his grandfather and all the stories the old man had told about structures that had survived when more advanced buildings failed. The grandfather had lived through wars and storms and earthquakes, and had learned that sometimes the simple approach was the strongest. Dr. Valterra came by late in the evening with a few colleagues who wanted to examine the human structure more closely. They used instruments to scan the walls and framework, looking for hidden technology or advanced materials that might explain how such a simple design could hope to compete. They found nothing unusual, just clay and fiber and mineral. Binder mixed according to ratios that seemed to be based on traditional knowledge, rather than scientific calculation. The framework was made from local wood that had been shaped and joined using techniques that looked ancient. One of the scientists asked Jack if he had any backup systems or emergency protocols for when his structure failed. Jack said that he did not expect it to fail, but if it did, then he would learn something important for next time. His grandfather had always said that failure was just another teacher. Maya Johnson stayed up most of the night reviewing her notes and observations about Jack's construction methods. She was beginning to understand that what looked like primitive building techniques was actually a sophisticated understanding of natural forces and material properties. Developed over thousands of years, the alien teams made final preparations with their advanced equipment, running diagnostics and updating software and charging energy systems. Their confidence was high because they had built their structures using the most advanced technology available in the galaxy. As dawn approached, Jack made one final inspection of his building, touching each wall and beam to make sure everything felt right. His hands had learned to detect problems that instruments might miss, and he trusted his grandfather's knowledge more than any computer analyst. The testing area was prepared with monitoring equipment and safety barriers. The consortium officials took their positions while news crews from across the galaxy set up their cameras. Amy Rodriguez positioned herself to get the best view of what she expected to be a spectacular failure of human engineering. Jack stood beside his humble structure as the first test began, looking calm and confident, despite the overwhelming odds against him. His building looked like a relic from ancient times, surrounded by monuments to advanced alien engineering, but his grandfather had taught him that good work always spoke for itself, and soon everyone would hear what his building had to say. The storm was about to begin, and Jack was ready for whatever the planet could throw at him. His foundation was strong, his framework was sound, and his understanding of natural forces was deeper than any computer simulation. The aliens had built impressive towers, but Jack had built something that would last. The first test began with a low rumble that came from deep underground. The seismic generators activated, sending controlled earthquake waves through the construction site. All around the area, alien structures responded to the ground movement in different ways. The Vorthok crystal tower resonated with harmonic frequencies that absorbed and redirected the seismic energy. Lights flowed through its transparent walls as the building converted ground vibrations into managed electrical patterns. The effect was beautiful to watch, like captured lightning dancing inside living. Christocathera biostructure reacted by growing new root systems that burrowed deep into the soil. The living metal walls became more flexible, and the entire building swayed with a natural rhythm that matched the earthquake waves. Sensors throughout the structure monitored stress levels and adjusted the building's response in real time. Other alien structures showed equally impressive adaptations. Force fields activated to isolate foundations from ground movement. Gravity manipulators countered seismic forces with precisely calculated opposing pressures. Advanced materials flexed and reformed to distribute stress across their entire mass. Jack building responded differently as the ground shook beneath it. The dome structure moved with the vibrations, but did not resist them. The clay walls flexed slightly while the internal framework distributed forces through carefully designed pathways. The building seemed to breathe, with the earthquake absorbing and releasing energy in a rhythm that looked almost natural. Darveltera watched the human structure with growing fascination. Her instruments showed that it was experiencing the same seismic forces as the alien buildings, but its response was unlike anything she had seen before. Instead of fighting the forces or converting them, the building seemed to dance with them. Maya Johnson was taking detailed notes on how each structure handled the seismic test. She noticed that while the alien buildings were using energy and complex systems to manage the forces, Jack building was accomplishing the same result through pure design and material properties. Amy Rodriguez provided commentary for her galactic audience, describing the impressive technological responses of the alien structures. She mentioned the human building only briefly, noting that it appeared to be surviving through luck rather than engineering skill. The seismic test continued for 2 hours with gradually increasing intensity. All structures remained standing, though some of the alien buildings began showing signs of stress. Small cracks appeared in a few walls, and several energy systems had to increase power to maintain their protective fields. Jack building continued its gentle dance with the earthquake forces. The clay walls showed no cracks, and the framework remained perfectly aligned. Jack himself looked calm and unsurprised, as if he had expected exactly this response from his carefully designed structured. When the seismic test ended, there was a brief pause while consortium officials reviewed the data. All structures had passed the first challenge, but the real tests were still to come. Next would be the gravitational flux, followed by the devastating plasma storms that had destroyed countless buildings throughout the planet history. Lisa Chen found Jack during the break and asked how he felt about his building performance so far. Jack said that everything was going according to his grandfather's plans. The old man had taught him that good foundations and proper framework could handle any force if they were designed to work with nature instead of against it. The gravitational flux test began. An hour later, massive generators created areas of altered gravity that moved across the construction site. Like invisible waves, buildings suddenly became heavier or lighter as the gravitational fields passed over them, creating enormous stress on every structural element. The alien structures responded with their characteristic technological solutions. The Vorthok Tower used energy fields to maintain consistent internal gravity, while the Xanthari biostructure grew additional support systems in real time. Other buildings activated anti-gravity systems or structural reinforcement protocols. Jack building handled the gravitational changes through its framework design. As gravity increased, the dome shape distributed the additional weight evenly across its foundation. When gravity decreased, the building internal tensions kept it stable and grounded. The response was passive but effective. Dr. Veltara was amazed by what she was seeing. The human structure was managing gravitational flux without any active systems or energy consumption. It was accomplishing through design alone what the alien buildings required. Advanced technology to achieve. Katie Williams watched nervously as Earth's reputation hung in the balance. The human building was performing well so far, but the plasma storms were still to come, and those were the real test of any structure on this planet. Many advanced buildings had fallen to the devastating energy discharges as the gravitational test continued. Some of the alien structures began showing more serious problems. One building energy systems overloaded, trying to maintain stability, and had to switch to backup power. Another structure suffered framework damage when its anti-gravity systems failed. Briefly, Jack building continued its steady performance, adapting to each gravitational change through pure mechanical design. The clay walls remained intact, and the framework showed no signs of stress. Maya Johnson was documenting everything with growing excitement as she realized she was witnessing something remarkable. The gravitational test ended with all structures still standing, but several of the alien buildings had suffered damage that would affect their performance in the final challenge. Emergency repair systems activated on multiple structures while Jack building required no maintenance at all. Amai Rodriguez interviewed several alien engineers during the break between tests. They expressed confidence that their structures would survive the plasma storms, despite the minor damage they had sustained. Their technology was designed specifically for these conditions, and they had backup systems for their backup systems. Zerthal admitted that the seismic and gravitational tests had pushed her crystal tower closer to its limits than expected, but insisted that the plasma storm phase would favor her energy-based design. The building could absorb and redirect plasma strikes better than any purely mechanical structure. Ekathora was also confident about her biostructure ability to handle plasma storms. The living systems could repair damage in real time, and the building could literally evolve new defenses as needed. She predicted that only the most advanced biological and energy-based structures would survive the final test. Jack spent the break walking around his building one more time, feeling for any signs of stress or damage. He found none. The clay walls were solid, the framework was perfectly aligned, and every joint remained tight. His grandfather knowledge had guided him well. So far Dr. Veltara approached Jack with a team of scientists who wanted to understand how his building was performing so well. Without any advanced technology, Jack tried to explain that his grandfather had taught him to think of buildings as living things that needed to work with their environment rather than dominate it. The scientists looked skeptical, but they could not argue with the results. The human structure was outperforming buildings that cost millions of credits and required the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They asked Jack what he expected would happen during the plasma storm test. Jack said that he had designed his building to handle electrical energy the same way it handled mechanical forces. The clay mixture included minerals that would conduct and disperse electrical charges, while the framework provided multiple pathways for energy to flow safely to the ground. As the final test approached, the alien teams made last-minute adjustments to their systems while Jack simply stood beside his building with quiet confidence. The storm generators were powering up, and soon the contest area would be filled with deadly plasma discharges that could melt metal and shatter crystal. The moment of truth was about to arrive, and everyone would soon discover whether ancient human wisdom could triumph over advanced alien technology. The purple sky began to darken as artificial storm clouds gathered overhead, and the first flickers of plasma lightning appeared in the distance. The plasma storm began with brilliant flashes of purple and white energy that split the alien sky like supernatural lightning. The storm generators created artificial weather more violent than anything found in nature. Bolts of pure energy struck the ground with enough force to vaporize metal and turn stone to glass. The alien structures responded immediately to the plasma bombardment. The Vorthok crystal tower channeled the electrical energy through its harmonic systems, creating beautiful light displays as it converted destructive force into managed power. The building glowed like a giant lamp as energy flowed through its crystalline matrix. Cathera biostructure grew new protective layers as plasma strikes hit its walls. The living metal absorbed electrical charges and distributed them through biological pathways, while damaged sections regenerated in real time. The building pulsed with bioelectrical activity as it fought against the storm. Other alien structures activated their final defensive systems. Force fields deflected plasma strikes, while energy absorbers converted electrical attacks into useful power. Advanced materials shifted their molecular structure to become more resistant to electrical damage. Jack building handled the plasma storm in its own unique way. When lightning struck its dome, the electrical energy flowed through mineral pathways and the clay walls, and down through the framework into the ground. The building acted like a giant lightning rod, dispersing dangerous energy safely into the planet. Dr. Veltara watched in amazement as the human structure effortlessly handled plasma strikes that were overwhelming some of the alien buildings. The clay and mineral mixture was conducting electricity more efficiently than advanced materials that cost thousands of credits per unit. Maya Johnson documented everything as the storm intensified. The alien structures were using enormous amounts of energy to maintain their defenses, while Jack building required no power at all. It was accomplishing the same result through pure design and material selection. As the plasma bombardment continued, several alien structures began to fail. The energy systems in one building overloaded, causing cascade failures throughout its defensive networks. Another structure lost its force field generators when plasma strikes exceeded their designed capacity. The Vorthok crystal tower began showing stress fractures as its harmonic systems reached their limits. Watched in horror as cracks spread through her beautiful creation. The building had been designed to handle enormous energy loads, but the plasma storm was beyond even its advanced capabilities. Cathor biostructure was also struggling as its regeneration systems fell behind the rate of damage. The living metal was consuming all its stored energy, trying to repair plasma damage and grow new protective layers. The building was literally exhausting itself in the fight for survival. One by one, the alien structures began to collapse. Their advanced technology had been overwhelmed by forces that exceeded their design parameters. Billions of credits worth of engineering crumbled into smoking ruins as the artificial storm continued its devastating assault. Jack building stood firm through it all. The dome shape deflected direct strikes while the framework channeled electrical energy safely away from critical areas. The clay walls showed some surface damage, but their internal structure remained intact. The building was weathering the storm exactly as Jack had predicted. Amy Rodriguez was forced to revise her coverage as the impossible happened before her cameras. The primitive human structure was surviving conditions that had destroyed the most advanced buildings in the galaxy. Her commentary shifted from mockery to amazement as she watched Jack building endure. When the plasma storm finally ended, only one structure remained completely intact. Jack's humble dome sat quietly among the ruins of technological marvels, looking as solid and unshakable as it had from the beginning. The contrast was stunning and undeniable. Citations fell over the contest area as spectators and officials tried to understand what they had witnessed. The human had won not through luck or accident, but through superior understanding of fundamental engineering principles. His simple approach had triumphed over the most advanced technology in the galaxy. Sirithal was the first alien to approach Jack. Her crystalline form was dimmed with shock, and her voice lacked its usual arrogant tone. She asked how a primitive structure had survived when her advanced tower had failed. Jack explained gently that working with natural forces was often more effective than fighting against them. Cathera joined them, looking humbled and confused. Her biostructure lay in ruins behind her. Despite all its adaptive capabilities, she asked Jack to explain how clay and straw could be stronger than living metal. Jack said that strength came not from the materials themselves, but from understanding how to use them properly. There Veltara arrived with her team of scientists, all eager to study Jack building and learn from his methods. She admitted that human engineering was far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. The aliens had been so focused on advanced technology that they had forgotten basic principles. Jack spent the rest of the day teaching alien engineers about sustainable construction and working with environmental forces instead of against them. He showed them how to read natural patterns and use traditional materials in ways that complemented rather than dominated their surroundings. Maya Johnson published her research showing how Jack's approach represented a different kind of advancement, one based on wisdom and understanding rather than just technological complexity. Her work sparked interest throughout the galaxy in human building methods. Amy Rodriguez's documentary about the contest became a sensation across galactic media. The story of the human who defeated advanced alien engineering with ancient wisdom captured imaginations everywhere. Earth suddenly found itself respected as a source of valuable knowledge. Chen proudly represented humanity as the Galactic Engineering Consortium formally recognized Jack's victory and invited Earth to share its construction philosophies with other worlds. The political implications were enormous for humans standing in the galactic community. Katie Williams worked with consortium officials to establish exchange programs where human engineers would teach traditional methods while learning alien technologies. The combination of ancient wisdom and advanced science promised to revolutionize construction throughout the galaxy. Jack prepared to return to Earth, knowing that his grandfather's lessons had opened doors for all humanity. The old man had been right that good work always spoke for itself, and sometimes the oldest wisdom was the most advanced technology of a loss. Jack packed his simple tools. He reflected on what had happened here. The aliens had learned that true engineering was not about having the most sophisticated equipment, but about understanding the fundamental forces that govern the universe and working in harmony with them. The contest had ended, but the real work was just beginning. Humans and aliens would now collaborate to develop new approaches that combined the best of both worlds. Traditional wisdom would guide advanced technology toward solutions that were both powerful and sustainable. Jack looked one last time at his humble building, standing strong among the ruins of fallen towers. It would remain here as a monument to the power of simple solutions and the value of ancient knowledge. The galaxy would never again dismiss human engineering as primitive. The purple sky was clearing. As Jack walked toward the transport that would take him home, he carried with him not just victory, but the knowledge that humanity had something valuable to contribute to the wider universe. His grandfather would have been proud to see that old wisdom could still teach new worlds.